Hello, welcome to Zatu Games. Today, myself and two of the grumpiest bloggers I could find, I'm going to be telling you our top 4 niggles in board games. So, let's go see what annoys us the most. Hello, welcome to Zatu's top niggles in board games. What are niggles? Well, it's not these two gentlemen with me. It is when you have something about a board game. It's not about whether you like the game, whether the game's good or anything, but something that it's probably when the game is good and it does something that just winds you up a little bit. An example that's not on my top list is I recently, because of the man on the end there, Tom Newton, got, what did I get, Tom? Black Rose Wars.
Black Rose Wars.
Really good insert, really lovely components, and at the top it's got this, the top of the insert is beautifully arranged to display these tokens, and everything fits apart from those 4 square tokens. You actually damaged yours pushing them in, didn't you? I did, yeah. I've had to stick mine back together with PVA because yeah, I really went for it and yeah, damaged them.
At what point when you were doing that though, did you like not stop? Did you not?
To be honest,
don't go in. Don't go in. But I'm gonna keep trying anyway.
I realised it was a bad idea almost immediately, but still carried on with it because I'm a moron.
Well, you want them. You're like, this must be me that's making the mistake. They must fit in.
Exactly. I mean, as you say, the rest of that insert is. I know I'm kind of already starting on a rant here. I swear you've done this to try and set me off. Yeah, the rest of the insert is beautiful. I'm talking better than CMOD levels of insert, and it's really, really good. Except for these tiny little tiles, which for some reason don't fit. And I was like, this has got to be a problem with me.
They're perfectly square, and I was going, oh, maybe they're rectangular, even though I could see they were square. Anyway, we're joined again by Tom, the Punk Meeple. You should recognise him by now. And we also have, in between us, Gav. You don't have a board gaming nickname, do you?
No.
Well, it's just Gav.
Just Gav.
Gav Hudds, who works for Remedy Entertainment, the video game company, and is one of the bloggers on Zatu. Anything else you want to add to that, Gav?
Other than just clearing up that I do not work for Remedy Entertainment, I feel it's like something we should.
He's also high on morphine. So let's go. I'll go first because I feel mine will be. I don't know. I got a feeling you two got a bit more anger, although today has made me angry. So I'm going to go with my. This is the least problematic, sort of. Non-flat boards and cards. So you open up a new board game. You're really excited. And the cards have been wrapped up in shrink so much that they're bent, and then you kind of bend them back, and they go like that because they've all stuck together as well. And then you lay the board out for your first game without even thinking about that it's been jammed up in this box for so long, and the 2 layers don't sit. And especially if it's a lighter game where you can just explain it and go. You're trying to put bits of the box on, but the box isn't heavy anymore because you've taken all the components out. And for your first game, the board is like that, and the cards are like that. So that's mine. I don't really know what they do about it because
I can tell you what they do about it. This is actually, do you know, as much as I'm going to be like, I'm going to try and catch you out and say you're being really, really like, you know, you're being far too sensitive. This is actually so much of a problem. There was a product on Kickstarter last year that are basically like these little clips that you can put on, and it actually holds the 2 bits. No, the world is with you on this one.
Is that not just a paper clip, or just like a clip that you could just buy?
I'd be scared about the paper clip.
To be honest with you, probably 3D print one, but it's kind of something that you would just like. Oh, that's it. That's Nick's off.
Done. Done. A 3D print one.
Yeah, you just kind of slip it on the corner of the 2 bits that are, you know, that aren't connected, and yeah, problem solved.
I'm just going to say,
you see, Kingdom Rush know this from the player boards in Kingdom Rush. Do the same thing that you've said. You know, they curve up like that. So for the new one, they're trying to charge you extra to get neoprene player mats.
That's the other solution.
But equally, neoprene player mats all curl at the end, so that they're not a solution to that problem. They're actually that problem again.
With ones that have been stitched, tend to lay down flat in my experience. But yeah, with smaller player, when you've got the whole board, they tend to lay down flat. But as long as you store them rolled up, if you store them folded in a box, they flip. They're like one of those magic fish that you tell the fortune with, aren't they, on the hand? It's like flipping all over the place. Not seen those red.
What you're on about?
Yeah.
Get them in a cracker. Yeah.
I am going to say as well, today I finished my video preview for Uranus, and we've already almost hit levels of points where I could have said that's what she said in our preamble and our recorded amble. I'm not going to do it, but if you see me just losing it, that's probably because I'm thinking, well done, Tom, you've just dropped another clanger there. Okay, so that was my first one, and yeah, good amount of agreement there. And that's my least problematic. Go on then, Gav. I'm looking forward to this.
Right, so my number 4 is lies on the box, particularly around player count, where they will say that this game is for like 2 to 6 people, right? That's already a red flag. 2 to 6 is too broad, because what they mean is it's a party game for 6 people. So you'll buy that game, and unless you can get those 5 or 6 people together, it's not going to work. Deception Murder in Hong Kong is a big one for this. Everyone knows you can only play that with 5, like, minimum, and yet the box says 3, like, just with 2 of you. Like, one of you's the murderer, the other one knows everything, and then there's just one person who... 4 maybe it is, but like, it doesn't work anyway at the lower level, and it's a lie. But I all of mine are like cheats, and this then narrows down into bad solo mode. Like, really bad solo mode, where they put one on because solo modes are popular now, you know, but they've not bothered paying someone like David Turtsey to design a solo mode, and they've just gone, just play it on your own and flip over cards from deck and see what happens.
And here's some meaningless titles if you hit this score.
Yeah, it's some meaningless titles if you hit the score. And then last to that is...
This is all one.
Yeah, it's all one. Is that we've talked about this before, it's like cooperative games that will then invent a solo mode that is completely unnecessary. So the big one, I've talked about Kingdom Rush already, but Kingdom Rush, I love Kingdom Rush by the way, but Kingdom Rush invented this solo mode that was just impossible to play. It was too awkward. Had this really weird rule where they knew it didn't work, so you could bring in the characters at random, but only use them once, and then they were gone. When actually it was like, just play it with 3 characters or 2 characters, because all the information's open. Like, just say to play it solo, you play it like that. Like the Ghostbusters Blackout that I've just reviewed does it perfect. There's always 4 characters on the board. If you're playing it solo, you run all the characters. If you're playing it with 2 of you, you have 2 each. It works perfectly as a scaling model.
Lies often people are upset about the lies about game length on the board on the box as well. I just never
come back to that one.
It's just because you said lies.
No, my number one, my first one is lies about game length on the box. Because I mean, to be honest with you, I thought Gav was about to step on this one. I thought, no, I got through it, and then Nick just wandered in with his size 12,
that's where he was, because he made it lies,
right.
But it was specifically about player count.
Yeah, no, when a board game box says, yeah, you're going to be done with this, 60 minutes, 90 minutes max, and 4 hours later, you're still sat there. And admittedly, a bit of that is kind of like maybe it's your first game. You've got to go to the rule book for a couple of checkups and stuff like that. But when some of these things that you'll these estimated play times when it'll be like 30 minutes per player, and you're like no, just no.
And then you see
and
per
the worst
player
thing is
per player is where I will come in later, but per player is the big red flag on that. That's the big red flag.
There are some games
because also what they're signalling to you is that you are going to spend 30 minutes not playing the game for every other player around the table when it's per player.
Ooh,
that's what they're telling you.
That's a good point. I keep looking in the wrong direction, but that is...
But I've lost my train of thought now. But basically, no, it's okay. Lying board game boxes that say... Oh, that's it as well. That's what I was going to say. Is because there's a time when you'll be like, don't worry, this will only take 2 hours to play. There might be someone around the table who's never played before. Right? They're like, This will only take 2 hours. It'll be fine. And then an hour and a half in, you're looking at your round tracker. You're like round 5 of 12, and you've told this poor person that's never played this game before in their life that don't worry, it's going to be a light and breezy 2 hours. And you're looking at it going, we're going to be here for like we've got like another 2 hours to do, 2-3 hours.
I made it,
and they're already like going, I'm really out of my depth. They're holding their cards. They're desperately trying to like. And you're like, I'm so sorry that I've done this to you, but they don't want to get up because
we recently.
If it takes 3 hours to 4 hours to play, say that. Wear it on your sleeve proudly.
During the last lockdown break, when you could actually have people in your house, one of my mates came round for a night. So we really, we tried Teotihuacan on a last minute kind of thing. Like we've played it before quite a few times, but we just did a scan read, and when we say we, obviously mean I. And after 3 hours, we just hit the third waypoint, and we were like, something wrong here, because we've still got 2/3 of this game to go, and it's usually really quick. And we've like almost built the pyramid, and I was like, oh yeah, this turn tracker should have been moving on every turn. Every time one of us had both, I was like, oh. That wasn't the game's fault. Yeah, I don't tend to read the boxes for time taken, so I tend not to get annoyed. But if I did read them, I'd be like, yeah. What happens to me usually is I'm playing a lot more lighter games now. I'll go, oh, that only took 15 minutes, and it tends to say half an hour to 45 minutes, which is probably the better way around. But interestingly, it's not on my list, but age rating on board games, the lie's about 14 plus. They have an excuse for that, because it actually costs more because they have to get it tested for under 14s. So if they don't want to spend the money on having the things, you'll find a higher age rating on it than. So that's why you might get Scooby-Doo 14 plus. It's like it's practical reasons rather than testing.
I did not realize that.
Yeah. That's why it's good that Board Game Geek has the feature where you can rate it for age community. So I always go there. Interestingly though, big shout out to Euphoria from Stonemaier Games. Myself, we played a 4-player game of that on Tabletop Simulator in 45 minutes when everyone knew what they were doing. And that's quicker than it sometimes takes in real life. So that's just showing off, really.
Did you all have somewhere to be?
No, we were just like, I think by the time everyone got to their go, you kind of know what you want, and you can always bump people in that game, so nothing's totally blocked. So it's there's usually something you can do. My number 3 is kind of similar to lies, but it's more hidden lies, and that is box size. You don't see it till you open the box, and sometimes the insert is designed so cleverly that even when you open the box, you go, ooh, it's fairly full. And one of the things I love about board gaming currently, namely these fancy game trays, they make it worse sometimes because they actually fill out the space. And if you took everything out of the game trays, I had a box that it was only that size, it wasn't big, but it could have been like a deck of cards and a few tokens. And I was like, they're appealing to my shallowness in the game trays there. Oh, look how fast I can set up. Just take out the 2 trays. Yeah, before you'd just gone like that. And it would have been set up. So it's kind of one of those things. But box size can really... Certainly when it's all ridiculous as well. Someone got just... they posted it on Facebook earlier. It was just a tin... You know the square tins you get, like Get Bit size, like the little square boxes, skull size. So it was a metal tin... And when they took the insert out, all the components fit in one corner of that tin. And they got it for like £5, but still it was like, man. And I know why they do it.
I think the worst offender for that has got to be Santa Monica. I mean, that is a deck of cards in a box that is as big as Mariposa's, which has got more in it.
I see your Santa Monica and I raise your Walking Dead... I can't remember what it's called. Not All Out War, the card game one, where it is literally just a deck of cards. It's not in it could be in a standard deck of cards box.
I am looking at my worst offender. Have any of you lot played Among the Stars?
Yes, but I think only virtually.
It's a deck of cards, right? That They're not even full-size cards. They're squares. It's just that and a few cubes. And I'm looking at it now. The box is bigger than Fury of Dracula.
It could literally fit in a Tic Tac box.
Don't get me wrong. Brilliant game, absolutely brilliant game. And in fairness, it does mean I've got all of the expansions in there and the 2-player. Well, yeah, the fact that in the base game box I can fit the base game, 2 expansions, and the 2-player offshoot game all in the spare box, in that one box, and still have room.
Yeah, that's the good. Yeah, if there's then expansions that aren't planned in the insert, because although I appreciate expansions that are planned in the insert, it does also make me go, oh, you haven't finished this game, you've already got spaces in the insert for it, which annoys me. So if suddenly and I can fit it all in the box, because I am a hoarder, but I have a wife, so I have to throw out, things like expansion boxes. So you do not want to see, Tom, what I've done with the Sator box. Everything from Black Rose Wars is in the Kronos and the core box.
That hurts me here. That really does.
I'm questioning whether I need to recycle the cards that have been replaced. I can't quite do it for fear that I've made a mistake, but I might have to put them in storage.
Yeah, that's terrible. That is when it's like, here we go, some reprinted cards, and what I'll do is I'll be like, this is the reprinted one. This is the original one I have to throw away, and I'll put them next to each other, and my brain will just forget. And I'll be like, I think it's this one, but I can never throw this one away.
This is awful, because a lot of them haven't changed. On some decks, they change things like capitalization, like they've actually capitalized. So that, I can look at that. On most of them, I had to look at the backs and see a small difference between the linen finish. And I was like, but I'll be able to help you. So that's fine. So yeah, box size. And this works the other way as well. Sometimes I think like boxes get shrunk too much for what they could be a bigger game. Like generally the tiny epic games get away with it. But I think most people would say they would love to see a tiny epic galaxy with slightly more space to play, not shrunk down so much. They'd like it bigger. So I think sometimes that does work against it. My beer mat here, Microbrew, that really pushes the boundaries of what fits in a tin. And yeah, I wonder if I'd like to see it bigger. So there we go. That's me done.
That's just like therapy.
I know. It's going to be so long. Go on, Gav.
So my sort of third down on the list is Rulebooks. And mainly, this again, a lot of mine probably say more about me than they say about games. And my lack of ability to focus and my lack of patience for things. But I do find, and I talk about this sometimes in my reviews, I do find that sometimes rule books are massive barriers to inclusiveness in the game, in that my ability to focus, the worst one recently I had, and it's maybe why I didn't like the game, was the crew, which it was a solution to a problem that no one had, which is where they put these rules down the side as well as in the middle and said these are quick reference. But if, like me, you struggle to concentrate, I was trying to read both sets of rules at once and none of it was making sense. And it was a simple trick-taking game that actually took me about 40 minutes to read the rulebook, up to the point where it says, now you can start playing the game. So I was like, well, I don't want to play the game anymore. I thought it was a trick-taking game. I thought I could just go, what's the one rule that this is different to other trick-taking games? But it wasn't. And then the other extreme of that is things like Robinson Crusoe, which have, it's just like walls of text. And so even if I've not played Robinson Crusoe, I love the game, but if I've not played it for a bit, there's so many exceptions and there's so much then going on Board Game Geek just to see, you know, have I interpreted this card right? And it is partly because the game's in translation as well, and some of the translation isn't as clear as obviously they'd probably hope and like as well. So there's a lot of, is this this, is this this? And then really it comes down to what Jerry Hawthorne said about Might and Mystics, which is an awful rule book. There's so many gaps in it. And there's so many questions. Somewhere on Board Game Geek for that, Jerry Hawthorne said, well, it's your game and your adventure, so just do what you want. And I'm in two minds about that. One of them is, that gives you the power, but the second part is, but I've paid you to design the game. I want you to tell me what I'm supposed to do and if I'm allowed to do that. I don't want that power. I don't want it. Actually, I don't want it. You can have it back. You can have it back, Jerry Hawthorne.
I like it when it results to your fun. So if I'm playing a game with my boy, and we might just take a shortcut if we're playing a cooperative game, and it's more about I can see that he's whatever. I want to win, so we take a shortcut. But yeah, I think when it's because the answers aren't actually there, I start to agree with you there. And the other thing is, I remember I got Russian railroads very early into this hobby. Tried to read the rulebook and couldn't. Literally had to put it down. Came back to it a year and a half later, something like that. Read it really easily. And I think there's with all hobbies, there's the jargon, and like if I started talking to myself when I played basketball now, I would have using the hamster time machine, I would have no clue. Do you know what I mean? It'd be really inapproachable because you have words for all the technical terms, and some of that's unavoidable. But I do think a lot of times they can do a much better job at explaining. You're going to draft the card. Well, what? That's usually explained well, actually. But saying this is called that. You're going to take the cards from the central tableau. This is called drafting, and then suddenly you're like, oh, we did that in that other game, that sushi game or whatever, and it makes connections. I think we do miss a lot of that.
On that note, my biggest irritant recently has been leader games and things like Fort and Root, where they will do that. They'll say you're going to take that from there, but they will give it a cutesy or different name to the expected jargon that we all use. And it's like, but if you just called it drafting, or just call it taking a card, I would know what you meant. But no, you've been that committed to theme that you've decided to theme the language of the rulebook as well to a level that actually makes it incomprehensible.
Do you know when it's worse?
And I don't know what you're on about now.
It's worse when that's the only example of theme in the game. The game is as dry as anything, and the rulebook's like totally themed all these moves and stuff. I'm like, why are you calling it that?
51st Day jokes within that. So like the rulebook person is a character that's making fun of you for not wanting to read the rules or understand. Just tell me the rules. I don't need you giving me lip while you're telling me the rules. 51st Day. I don't need it. I just want to play the game. It looks all right. It looks good. I want to play it.
Yeah, I do go like this.
Don't tell me off.
When I get a rule book and it says law, I'm like that. Yeah, don't need to read that. Don't need to read that. Background story. Don't need to read that. Don't need to read that. Come on then, Tom.
So yeah, rule book.
So you both know I like a Kickstarter.
Oh, I thought you were going to say grump.
I think most people who have ever seen me talk on any of these things will know that I like a Kickstarter.
You make me look good, actually.
Sorry?
You make me look good. It's one of the categories where I think I'm not quite as ahead of you. Like, board game collection, I'm like, oh, I'm the worst at that because I've got so many. And like, Tom will help me out. What? How have you only got 5 games, Tom? But then Kickstarters, yeah, you make me look good.
Yeah. No, I like a Kickstarter. But so Kickstarters have stretch goals, and stretch goals are wonderful. But you know what isn't wonderful? When you get the box and there's absolutely no mention of what these stretch goals are. And you'll be there and you'll be like, okay, I've got a big box, I've got extra stuff in here, and then you'll find like a deck of cards or an extra mini that's not referenced anywhere in the rule book, and you're like, what is this stuff? So you're off to Board Game Geek, and it's like, oh yeah, that's I don't know, Tweedledee, the extra hunter that you got for this game. I was like, oh, brilliant. How do I use them? He goes, to use that, I've then got to go to
download a PDF.
Back update number 36, which has the details of exactly what this is. And I'm like, you are joking. Like, so yeah, that annoys me.
To bring up Black Rose Wars again, it does reference it, but there's a character in there that has all completely different tokens. He's called Jankus or something. He's got totally different tokens.
Old Dukas.
Yeah. But then I read it, I did find it, and all the tokens and player board are for a different game. I'm like, I don't want that. That's in the bin as well.
Yeah. But yeah, there are some companies that are really good for this. So I think this War of Mine was one of the first ones that really did it.
Yeah.
So Awake and Realm are pretty good. They will give you generally a pamphlet that will be, okay, you've got all the rules for how to play the game. Here is a pamphlet for everything that we have done for stretch goals, and it'll be like, right, here is this mini expansion. This is what you're looking for. This is how it works. This is how to add it to your game. Yeah. Brilliant. Everyone needs to start doing that.
Or even if it's a deck of cards, the first card just with the rules on. I've seen lots of people do that. You know, it's less printing, whatever. Brilliant. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I think as a pamphlet is better though, because the worst thing is when you buy the retail version and they've done that, but they've put that in the normal rule book for the retail version as well. Like, they've just printed, and you get it, and it's like, here's what you could have won.
Yeah. I'm not saying it needs to go inside. It's just one of those. I prefer it not to be in the retail because, again, I am a big collector, and if I find out that if I get to the end of the rule book and there's still 3 pages left of like models and cards that I could have had if I would have just bought it on Kickstarter, I'm like, right.
Essentially, we were very upset when I got that Sato box. Part of you was a bit annoyed.
No. Spread the love of Black Rose Wars. It's a brilliant game.
My number 2 is quite similar to yours, although it does increasingly apply to retail games. Inserts, they're great. They're great or they're awful, aren't they? Basically, there's very few medium inserts. But these days, I'm old, I'm forgetful. A lot of my inserts now, I buy folded space ones because they're cheap. They ain't pretty. Let's be honest, they're not pretty. They're not made of wood. They're grey. Yes, some people have printed them up, but you take the pots out, you put them on the table, you don't even tip the components out, you use the inserts as part of the setup. Brilliant. Love that. That for me is better than prettiness. What I don't like is when you get a wonderful insert and similar to what Tom just said, no bloody instructions of where anything goes at all, or some obscure symbols that match nothing. Vindication was pretty bad for that. I was going
to say,
getting a torch. Where can I can see the symbols.
It's the same thing that's on the back of the cards, but because of the way it's vacuum formed, it's come out terribly. It's barely read what
that
it is.
blob looks like this icon, but it's
that a pet or it might be a legendary item. I'm not sure.
At least they made an effort. I just got Kanban, and that insert is really good, but I had to go on Board Game Geek and then go to an update. Just put the photos. I don't mind having to go to Board Game Geek. Put your photos on there as well. One thing I was going to say about when coming back to the rules, Gav, is that sometimes when I get a game, before I read the rules, I go on Board Game Geek to the rules forum and just see how many threads there are, just to get a guide of whether I'm likely to be able to grok this.
Robinson Crusoe, there's multiple frequently asked questions documents up there now. It's like it's got its own library in literature.
We've used that as a quiz
round. Different interpretations, different lore, different ways of interpreting the game.
We've used that.
It's great fun.
We've used it as a quiz round.
Time when you go to the FAQ and it's like 40 pages long, and you're like, oh.
FAQ version.
It's literally every card in that game as well.
1.86. That annoys me. 1.869. So it's 869th. Shut up. Yeah. Inserts, tell me how to pack them. Don't let me guess, because I'll do what Tom does and stick my square tokens in the wrong place, even though he did it in the right place.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I'll tell you what though, if we're shining a light on people who do this well, what's the name of the company? I can't remember. Anachrony, the Infinity Box.
Yeah, I mean,
absolutely brilliant.
The problem with that was there was just so much of it that it still took 2 hours to pack. But that one does feel like it's going to help the setup as well, like everything's done. Yeah. Stonemaier have been okay at that as well. But they put it in a place and they don't signpost it. So I think with Wingspan, which didn't really need one anyway, but one day I lifted the box off and it's on the side of the box, the inside box, the picture for how to pack, which makes sense because that's the box you're packing. But if you have it not facing you, you don't see it, and nowhere does it say see the side of the box. So, over to you, Gav, for your number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
There's no 1 there. You know that'll annoy me.
Well, that's because you're not up to your number 1 yet, are you?
Yeah, no. So you're saying I'm going to do a lot. Well, I am actually, because what you said there about the components, right? I'm going to include that in this because my number 2 is downtime.
Okay.
Any downtime in a game, I do have struggle with attention and staying and not interrupting and just telling people just do that now, get it done. So it's more about me again. It's more about my inability to focus, but the downtime in games. And I include setup and teardown as downtime because it's not the fun part of the game.
Okay, yeah.
It is we're getting this out. And if you're teaching the game, the other people don't know where things to go. And they'll try and help and they'll start getting them out and putting them in the wrong place. You're like, don't put it there. That's not where I put it. So that annoys me. But in the main downtime, so as you said earlier, 30 minutes per player. What that tells me is that game is, if there's 3 of us, it's an hour and a half long. And for an hour of that, I'm watching other people play the game in the main. That's what that tells me. When they do game time in that way, some of them will even say 45 minutes a player. That is like a long time, 90 minutes if there's 3 of you just sat there watching. So it's why I don't really like worker placement games, because there's a lot of that in worker placement games. I've done 15 actions now because we've got to that part of the game where I can think of all this and do all that. And now I've got to watch you do 15 actions. And then what annoys me most, though, is that when you're playing a game like that, the person who it comes round to, and they've not spent that time thinking what they're going to do with their turn. And so it gets to them and they go, oh, right, what am I going to do now? I will say, though, that analysis paralysis, I see more of a fault of the game rather than the players necessarily.
You don't know Mark.
And again, I partly say this from an inclusive position as well, in that I've got friends and the people who are more prone to analysis paralysis sometimes are people who might be neurodivergent and will look at something and need to. And I think sometimes some games have just not got that little bit of refinement to the choice tree that you've got in front of you to make it clear what one strategy is over another strategy, which then just locks things up. I'm speaking about myself there sometimes. When again, worker placement games, sometimes they're not clear enough in what you're going to do, and so you end up doing too much and not enough of one thing. And so it is more about me. It's just that I don't. But I just, any downtime in a game, I get really fidgety and really bored.
My friend,
it's why
go on.
We played Betrayal Legacy, and I really enjoyed playing Betrayal Legacy with my friends. But the bit where you have to go and read the book, and like you've read it and you've got it, and you're like, this is what I've got to do then. And someone else hasn't got it yet, and then there's someone else reading another book, and unfortunately in that game, their book doesn't have enough rules in for them to get it on their own, because it's like they need some of the reference that we've got in order to understand what they're reading. So back to Rulebooks, make sure the information's there, and then you've just got that whole bit in that game where you just sat reading, and like you can't even read it out to people. It's not that sort of rulebook.
I've said this before. My friend Mark has the worst type of analysis paralysis, where he's not even thinking about it in between turns because he's off with the fairies somewhere. He's like, like that. Then when it's his turn, he thinks about it for ages, and then he does something which is either against the rules and probably the rule that I've just explained to the guy before him, because they've asked the exact same question, but he didn't hear it. He's 19. He's not 90. And or he does something which puts himself in a worse position, and we're like, everyone else, we'd be like, yeah, just rewind it. You've taken seconds. We're like, no, you have to live with it. 19.
Oh, I can understand why he's like looking away though. If other people are taking a long time on their turn, I become more interested in like what's on the shelves, or
it depends on the game.
I start trying to put games in alphabetical order in my head or something like that are on the shelves, and I'm not thinking about the game.
If it's a good game or a game I enjoy, usually I'm so into it that I'm making plans A, B, C and D just in case these slots get taken up for me, and I'm like lost in the game board, so I'm not. But I also don't mind the conversation around it. If a game slows down because we're all having a chat, that's one thing. But yeah, I think sometimes the 30 minutes per player, it depends, doesn't it? If you're all getting 200 actions in that 30 minutes and it's like 2-second turns, you don't feel it as much. But it's when it's like 10-minute turns, that's when it can be like, ugh. Or yeah, everyone else is doing 15 comboed actions and you're still going, I'll just go here and get this rock.
Yeah, and it's not for me. It's not always game length either, or even the length of someone's turn, like you say. because I think an example for me would be like the Colonists versus War of the Ring, two very long games. Colonists, why they couldn't set it in space, why we have to keep having that theme, was one that just dropped off my list. But Colonists and War of the Ring, like War of the Ring, I'm engaged with that throughout. Even when the other person is taking their turn, it's taking time, I can be looking and thinking, oh, they're going over there, so I need to move my armies here, and I can mentally plan it out. The Colonists, you literally can't. You've just got to wait for them to take their turn to know what you're going to do next. And it just goes on forever, each turn. And I like the game, but there's that problem of I'm starting to drift off in it quite a bit.
Okay. Tom, your second.
So this one, I don't think I'm going to get any arguments from this. So the other thing, if people know anything about me, is two things. One, I like a Kickstarter. Two, I love an expansion. Absolutely love an expansion. If I've got a game that I like and there's an expansion for it, I want that expansion. But if that expansion has cards that do not have some kind of mark that allow me to remove it from the game so I can play it, I am very upset. So yeah, expansions that, or something like that, content that you can add to a game that doesn't have a way that you can easily identify what that content is and remove it without going to the manual and having to look at like all the list of the cards that are included. No, I want some kind of mark, an icon, something like that.
If you want me, just separate them all out in those games and I'll come round with my hole punch.
Look at his face. He actually literally had a moment of like extreme there. Just quickly registered across his face. As you said hole punch, there was like a moment of like, no, never.
I think that was him reacting to the idea of me coming round to his house, actually.
But it's like, come on. Your first one, when you're talking about your boards not lining up, I came to you with a genuine solution. What's your vandalism? You want to come around and vandalise?
Well, the only thing you can do is take a Sharpie to him, isn't it? In the corner.
Yeah.
That's all you could do.
I think more than not having a mark is having a mark that's so small, though, that you can't see it. Like in Elder Sign, all the expansions have their own little symbol, but it's all on little cards, and it's quite badly printed. It's like a bit blurry, and a lot of them are very similar. And so
star with 6 points and a star with 8 points.
You got to be like, well, which one is this? That
magnifying glass 1, 2, 3.
A little bit more.
Well, that essentially was my problem with the Black Rose replacement cards. Even replacement cards, like there's so many times when I'm like, my right is the replacement, left is the one that's going. My son says something to me, I look down and I go, pants. Which one is which?
But back to Elder Sign, I've got the Elder Sign replacement cards still in a pack, and now I don't know whether I've put them in or not put them in. And I've got the two things side by side and flipped them over and looked at them. And what annoys me more is I can't actually see any differences. I can't. Like a really hard spot the difference that I can't do.
I can one-up you on this one. So, again, my number one game of all time currently is a Kickstarter with many expansions, and that's Seventh Continent. Absolutely love that game. So I've got the first edition that came from the first Kickstarter, and then when the second one came along, they said, right, there were some issues with some of the cards in the first one. We're going to send you a pack where you can basically replace those cards from the first edition, so it'll be perfect. I was like, brilliant, excellent, I will do that. And it had basically all the cards to replace the base game and the expansions. Okay, so right, wicked. At this point, I hadn't shuffled the expansions into the main deck, so they were all still in their plastic wrap. The expansion, these replacement cards turn up, and then another email comes saying, sorry, there's been a problem with the colour in the replacement cards, so don't use those replacement cards. We're going to send out a replacement for the replacement cards. So at this point, I've now got a set of replacement cards that I can use none of because the colours are ever so slightly wrong. And then the second one turns up, and I replaced base game stuff, but I haven't replaced the expansion things. And I've taken the original base game cards and put them in with the replacements that I'm using. So I've now got 3 sets of cards that look almost identical. I'm not sure. Yeah.
And that colour thing.
An absolute nightmare to figure out.
That thing of what Nick said as well around, it's always in the game that you love. Like, I love Tiny Towns. It's creeped into my top 10 of all time now. But the middle expansion for Tiny Towns has different size cards and different colours. When asked about this on Board Game Geek, they just went, yeah, that's how it is. And then they released the new expansion, which has got the old style card and size. So people understandably asked, oh, will you be printing like a reprint for the ones in the middle one then? And they were like, no.
That is a bugbear for me, because it's like, I haven't had it much where there's, and this is one of the situations where I consider sleeves. If the colours aren't matched and they need to be matched, I'm like, oh, well, you don't leave. And then another company does it. Years later, 10 years later, they go, oh, we got a new expansion, and it's perfectly matched. And I'm like, how come the technology exists for one company, but not the other? And that's the same company. Right.
I can't remember which game it was, but there was one game that came up that the actual core of the cards was different. So it was white core in one of them and black core in the next one, which meant you could just look at it and go, right, that's an expansion card,
Yeah.
that's original. Then it's like,
yeah,
I genuinely can't remember what that is now.
I think that might be one that I've sleeved. I've got one like that. I can't remember what it is either. Right, now we're all well-oiled in anger. Let's move on to our top ones. Now, Gav, I'm a bit different to you. I don't mind reading the rulebook. I quite enjoy it. I relax somehow. But the proviso is that I often read my rulebooks, as any normal, sane person would do, in the bath. Now, it is extremely difficult to read rulebooks in the bath when they are that size. Now, this isn't even a bad offender but this is like Tiny Towns is this size, yeah? It's not as many pages, but it's the size of the box. This is Kanban, that's not even the size of the box. The rules don't need to be the size of the box, especially when the rest of the contents don't fill the box. I just want a little book-sized one that I've got no danger of dropping in the bath. Now, I know that says more about me, like Gav has been saying, but I do genuinely believe that when you've got those massive square rule books, even if you sat down trying to read them, they're flopping around like a wugga wugga, you know, you're making all the sound in the wind, and it's like, how much wasted space is there in them as well? So I want my rule books to be a reasonable size, even in bigger boxes. Just because you've got that width and height, you don't need to justify it by making the rule book the same size or dimensionally size. If it's a massive rule book, fair enough, if it's got lots of pictures, but in general, I do not want a flippy floppy rule book just because you chose to have a big box.
That was in my notes for rule books, the size of the rule book, and I just didn't get to it.
Excellent.
And mainly because my Tiny Towns ones, in particular, because there's only like 4 or 5 pages, it's too big for the staples to support it. So the staples have ripped out. So the whole thing just comes to pieces now because it's too big for the staples to support it. It's like they don't
and that
fit.
could be like...
and equally, you said if there's lots of pictures, but that makes it hard to read. If there's lots of pictures, that can make it hard to read.
Yeah.
So, and also, if anybody is wondering whether Nick is making this up, that he reads rule books in the bath.
Sent him photos.
No, he doesn't. He has sent me photos of him reading rule books for games that I would love to own, which he has managed to get hold of. He sends me photos of himself reading them in the bath.
The ultimate taunt. Two things you can't have.
I've been staying quiet because I also read rule books in the bath. If we're going to be open and honest and just put things on the table, it's a good place to read the rule book.
It's dead time otherwise, isn't it? It's dead time.
You're on your own. Dead time, yeah.
Look. That is perfectly. Moonrakers, look at that. Fine. Solid construction. If I let go of one hand, the other bit's not going to fly into the bubbles. Brilliant. I have to have a system where I get in the bath while it's running and read the bigger rule books at the start and work my way down to the smaller ones.
You take multiple rule books with you to the bath. You don't go, oh, I'm going to learn Kanban.
It depends. If it's something like Kanban, 1. Because it's like reading a book. But, you know, if I've got a couple of lightweight ones and they're all reasonable size, then, you know, I might take a few. I'm awful. I was on the Kindle in the bath. I'd read 40% of the book. I finished that book that night and the bath was freezing. Anyway, enough of my personal Tinder profile. Let's go on to Gab's number 1. And I'm expecting to get even crosser now. I mean, my poor wife, when I get off this call, I'm going to be furious still.
My number one is actually probably out of all of them, the only one that I'm genuinely angry about. You might not believe that from our feed, but this is the only one I'm genuinely angry about.
I'm looking forward to this.
That is, with the price of board games going up, I feel there is no excuse for relative shoddy production.
Shoddy workmanship, that's what it is. Shoddy, shoddy, shoddy.
Where it seems like things have not been tested as they've gone through the factory. There's been no back and forth. You know, I've got a game that I had that I ain't got anymore. Which one was it? I can't remember. But it had a magnet lid, which is something I wouldn't like anyway. And within like 2 openings, that magnet no longer worked and it flopped about, and then the lid was ripping. And, you know, shoddy. Equally shoddy, the bloggers will know this because I moan about it with nearly every game. Punch boards that aren't cut all the way through, that are perfect. If you've got odd shapes, Taverns of Tiefenthal's got odd shapes, and yet the perforation did not help you get that odd shape out of the cardboard insert because it was nowhere near the fiddly bit. It was always on the big bit that was easy to get out. And then you'd chop some poor serving woman's head off as you poked out the...
in your anger to relax.
And I'm really careful. I'm really, really careful. And, you know, but you can just poke through. Now, some companies are really good at just sending you out other sheets. So Cosmos Games, brilliant. Although it does mean that I have complained to them a couple of times about it. But really good. You get them in the post the next day, usually. They're that quick at just like, here's some in the office.
Yeah. And there's a difference, isn't there, between the odd sheet in a whole set, which has obviously just missed the cutter, and every single board where you're like, like, because in a good punch board, it's like, that's actually quite good fun going.
It's satisfying. It's
like
actually satisfying.
And then picking them all up. I remember there's a game that has cardboard turnips in, Village Pillage. Fantastic game. I got it on Kickstarter. I got wooden turnips in it, and I was so grateful because it wasn't bad cardboard, but it was thin, and they had the green stalk on it like that, spiky, and they were only that big, and I was like, there's no way. There's no way. It's absolutely crazy. Yeah, and that applies. Like, I got this mini, the wing had come off in packaging. I just glued it back on because it had come off at a weak seam. That's okay. That's packaging, that's shipping. It had been in its packet. There's nothing you can do about that. When something breaks off at an odd angle or whatever, then maybe it's not been packed well as well. But yeah, I think shoddy components.
And worse than punch boards is cards in a game that requires shuffling, that are the flimsiest, chippiest, scratchiest. You're going to shuffle these 3 times and they're going to have no picture on the front because it's been sort of like breathed onto it. Like, that's the picture just there. That's the heat transfer. And often in games like, I would even say Dominion, you know, it's seen as the great deck builder. But why do people have to sleeve it? Because, well, it's the daddy of deck builders, isn't it? But, you know, why do people have to sleeve it when you die hard get into it?
Yeah.
Because those cards are rubbish. They're absolutely awful and slippy, and you're trying to put them in the stacks at the start, and they're too shiny and slippy. And it's like, just make the game with them. And they're charging so much. So, you know, they're charging so much for some of these games that I think, yeah, really, some of it is profiteering a little bit. It's like, we're just giving you that. That's what it feels like as a consumer sometimes. That's what you're getting. That's what we're going to deserve to give you. And it puts me off a little bit.
The other thing with Dominion is I found that some of the expansions you could tell, like the same what you were saying, Nick, that you occasionally get different production. You could tell the expansion stuff.
Well, you generally can anyway.
That'd be good for you, though.
The first shuffling, you know, like the ones you've used loads, you're like, expand that much, because that's the other thing with inserts, isn't it? Like, the cards fit perfectly in their shrink wrap in the insert. You shuffle them once and they've tripled in size and they're going all over the place. But like, I'm like you, well, you're even more extreme than me. Like, I don't sleeve unless I have to, and what I consider I have to is probably a lower threshold than what you would do. But there's a game called Dungeon Mayhem, loads of fun. It's only like, the base set is only 10 quid. But do you know what? I'd have paid 20 quid for it if it had better cards, because I'm going to have to buy sleeves anyway. So,
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? Like, it's that one of those things, isn't it? One that gets me, and I love the game and I love the company, Root. Like, every edition of Root has had to have a sticker set for something that's gone wrong. And now I know there's a lot of boards and stuff but when it's the same thing every time, don't make that mistake again. Get someone to employ someone to read those things that you've made mistakes on before. Sorry, I did get angry then.
No, because you've now exercised me with era medieval age, which has got these yellow boards. At some point, and I don't know why this wasn't picked up earlier, they realised, oh God, you can't read any of the numbers or symbols on them because it's just this blank sheet of yellow, just this sea of yellow. So we'll come up with a solution that's absolutely impossible to apply.
Yeah.
If you've got any sort of neat mind, which are these long, thin strips of stickers that you've then got to get into recesses and match up to numbers perfectly. Otherwise, you can then see the offset.
To be honest, I'm going to try and take them off and use a wash. So if you get a paint wash, that will just sit in the recesses and we'll just make them show up. But I don't know if I can get them off now, and they're not straight. And I'm not one. I know I can't stick things on straight.
No.
But that I don't think,
is possible.
I don't think the machine that makes iPhones could stick them on straight. We got well done, Gav. Well done.
I think that is the worst production I've had, because someone should have picked that up earlier on in that production.
Yeah.
When you're getting sent the manufacturer's copy of you're all right to do this then. At what point when you've looked at that and gone, no, I'm not all right for you to do that? They've gone, yeah, I think that'd be all right.
Yeah.
Just do that.
Yeah. Don't need to see anything. Tom?
I can kind of see how that would happen, on a screen, if you know what I mean. So, because obviously your screen's generally fairly high, but the second you've got a printed copy of it, you go, "We've got a problem here. This needs fixing. Yeah."
Here's some black paint and a paintbrush.
Yeah. They're all at the back of the warehouse. Have fun.
Go on then, Tom. Hit us with your number one.
Do you know, this is going to seem incredibly trivial now.
Yes.
Right. Gav, what have you got behind you?
A Kallax.
What have I got behind me?
A Kallax.
Right.
I couldn't tell at first because you're in front of the middle.
Most board gamers store their... What do a lot of board gamers store their games on?
The floor!
Not you. But yeah. Kallax. So when they make a game that's too big to fit in a Kallax... Oh, it just winds me up. And I get it occasionally that, Twilight Imperium, huge game, absolutely huge. It's not going to fit. It's going to poke out the front. But there is one game which I am not going to name because we've been, encouraged not to name.
We've named a few anyway.
But there's one game, and I'm looking at it right now, which is just ever so slightly too big to fit into a game. And it just irritates me that it's sat on the... Brilliant game, right? Absolutely fantastic game. And I'm sure anybody who's played it and owns a Kallax knows exactly what game I'm talking about. But, it annoys me so much, that does.
I mean, your Kallax.
I think that's the thing. It's always the things, as we've said, though. We have Nathan games, but every game I've mentioned is a game I enjoy playing. And it's the thing that we've said is the niggle.
It's the Niggles, yeah.
Why, like Robinson Crusoe, I just wish it was easier to play. I just wish. I wish I wasn't setting myself
behind you, Gav. That goes up to the ceiling over your shoulder. Look at that.
That's because that is, speaking of two large boxes, that the Kingdom Rush boxes up there, and all those boxes are far too large for their contents. And there's a lot of contents in there, but they're still too large for the content.
Again, I can fold this into what Nick was saying as well. The annoying thing about that box being too big, doesn't need to be that big. There's plenty of air in that box. It feels like they've done it deliberately.
We can push other games off the shelf in the store.
Also up there is Cthulhu Death May Die, a game where I wish the box was a little bit bigger.
Oh,
because you've got to sit it in perfect and get the little the area maps in perfect and in a certain way. Otherwise, that lid's not going back on.
Yeah, That is a thing
You've got, it's so tight.
Yeah.
They've really...
When you have to pack a game exactly right to get the lid back on, that's another one.
I don't know if you can see which game this is, but yeah, Gloomhaven. Absolutely. My Gloomhaven box is probably like, well, it's got about a centimetre to like half an inch that's like just sticking up because I just can't get the tiles in the top of it properly. Just cannot do it. I'm sure.
And if you did it would take an extra hour to set up because they'd all be like at the bottom, down the side, and you know. I was thinking your Calyx would cause some people some stress because I don't take shelfies, I take stuffies. As in, these are the games stuffed in it wherever I can find them space. And behind some of your games are on an angle, and there's little ones stuffed into all.
Oh yeah,
gaps.
absolutely.
Yeah, I like it.
And it's Calyx. This is. And the other thing as well, I mean, this is how I do it. For instance, you'll notice there's a lot of games here where you'll have the main game at the front, and then all of the expansions are behind it.
Ooh.
So, like behind here,
the Madman has a system.
Yeah, there's behind here where my lovely Carcassonne meeple. Let's have a look at that.
That box is causing me some stress.
It's the wrong shape.
Yeah,
that's like where you're going to put it.
Expansions for Carcassonne behind there.
He's going to 3D print a rectangle box to slide the meatball into.
You know what? Funny enough, one of the things that I was thinking of that annoys me is like board game tins and stuff like that. And I didn't make my list properly, but for some reason I'm okay with that. I'm absolutely fine with that meeple.
Yeah, I think the thing
it's far worse to stand around.
If there was like 3 or 4 standardized sizes, that would be like, you know, that would be one you'd forgive it when there was more air in it. But people just make them, as we've just seen, any bloody shape they want to. Even when they're in a collection and they get slightly bigger. Like I'm worried, I've got Irish Gauge and Ride the Rails, and I'm worried Iberian Rails is going to be like just a little bit wider. So when they sit together on the shelf.
What didn't make my list, of course, the other thing I moan most about when we're chatting is anything that is in a set where the set looks similar, because I'll have to buy them. You mentioned expansions earlier.
Oh, your gift.
I will buy expansions, and I don't like expansions. Expansions nearly made my list as a board game niggle, just constant expansions. I don't like them, but I will still buy them because of that completist need. But I'm sat now and I'm looking at it, which is the GIPF games.
Yes.
And they have numbers on the side, and I own a game now called Punked, which I hate and I don't like. But I can't get rid of it because my numbers will go 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7.
Maybe you could sell the contents of the box to someone who really likes it in a plastic bag, and you just keep the box.
All the other GIPF games I love, and then there's just that one that just sits there and never. And it won't ever get played. Not actually, I don't hate it. I have played it, and it can be enjoyable. It won't ever get played though, because like if you're going to play a GIPF game, I'll be like, well, let's play this one. And then if you don't want to play that, I'll be like, let's play this one. And it's going to come 7th on that list every time. So it's going to have to be someone who really doesn't want to play any of the other 6.
And I bet it's not number 7 as well, so you could just ignore it. You'd be like, no, there was no 7th game. There was no 7th game. They should give you stickered numbers, and you can order them then. And then that way it would be... Well, listen, I thought we were in danger of having a list where I was going to have to call this Entitled Gamers Needs. But actually, I haven't been able to disagree with a lot of what's been said. I do with Gavin, expansions I'm 50-50 on, because sometimes I think, get an expansion, never play the base game. Or by the time I play the base game again, I'm like, shall we throw the expansion in? No, let's just replay the base game. So, but I do understand the kind of allure of them as well, especially if they upgrade something in the base game, like a minor upgrade in the base game and an expansion, and you're like, oh yeah, I love that. But actually, yeah, I agreed enough to give them all. I think that was a good list, gentlemen. If you have watched even a third of this, well done, because it's been ages. I'm just going to call it a ZatChat now because it's so long, but I think it's very entertaining, so it's definitely going up in its entirety. So sorry,
a bit too much downtime for me. There was a bit too much downtime.
I was eager to get in with my next number.
Yeah, I'd just rather it's just me next time. If I'm honest, I'll just do my 4.
Well, I normally do just 2 people, but I thought with this one that you know, there's a few people who get angry on the old Zatu Slack, so choose the good ones. Or the ones that, yeah, I won't say anything more. So thanks very much for watching. Do remember we are on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok, I think, as well. And we're live every week on Wednesdays on Facebook, Fridays and Mondays on Twitch. Go onto the blog, read these guys' wonderful output of written content, and we'll see you next time.